Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Hey discusses the halachos of a mavoi and the beam which you put over the entrance to the mavoi to make it permitted to carry within it, or the lechi, the side post that you put at the side to accomplish the same purpose. So we're going to have a couple of approaches here. First of all, the Gemara is discussing what happens if the beam is higher than 20 amos and you need to either fill in the ground under it so that it's less than 20 amos high. Next, the Gemara discusses what happens if the beam is actually too low and you need to dig out the ground to make a larger space. The Gemara will have a machlokes between the same people in each of them, and the Gemara will try a few explanations as to what the machlokes is about. Next, the Gemara is going to get into a discussion of how long a mavoi has to be considered a mavoi, and what dimensions it has to have, and what are the halachos if part of the mavoi's wall has fallen down. When can I still use the beam and the side post to permit carrying within the mavoi? So the first discussion is, if the mavoi's beam is over 20 amos, we said that's too high. In order to do that, you have to fill in the ground under it. So we had a machlokes between Rav Yosef as to how deep into the mavoi. We had a machlokes between Rav Yosef and Abaye as to how deep into the mavoi that raising of the ground has to be. Meaning we're creating a threshold, a raised platform under the beam so that the space between the floor and the beam is less than 20 amos. How deep into the mavoi does that raised platform have to go? According to Rav Yosef, it has to go 1 tefach. According to Abaye, it has to go 4 tefachim. The Gemara is going to offer no less than 4 potential explanations as to what this machlokes is about. So the first explanation is that Rav Yosef holds that you're not allowed to carry under the beam itself. Therefore, the beam is for the people who are inside the mavoi, are carrying inside the mavoi to see the beam. Now, if you just have raised ground under the beam itself, it won't help because it'll still be too high for the people that are inside the mavoi. Therefore, we have to extend the beam we have to extend the raised ground at least part way into the mavoi. And we use the amount of 4 tvachim because that's the smallest significant size in Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Eruvin. According to Rav Yosef, you are allowed to carry under the mavoi itself, and therefore the main function of the beam is for the people who are carrying under the beam itself. And if they notice the beam, then everybody else will also be aware that the beam is there. And besides, the main issue is exiting the mavoi into Rishus Harabim while carrying, or vice versa. Okay, now the Gemara doesn't like this. The Gemara is happy to reject this pshat. The Gemara says, no, I'll tell you another explanation as to what this machlokes is. The machlokes is, how does the beam work? Does the beam serve as a sign, as a heker, or does the beam serve as a wall? Halachically, having a beam high up is considered a wall, and the wall comes down halachically and closes off the mavoi. So Abaye holds it's a wall. Now the rule is that a wall is only functional if it is enclosing or serving an area which is at least 4 tvachim. The only part of the mavoi which is closed by this wall is the raised platform, because the rest of it is too low. The beam is too far away. It's too high. The beam is too high above the ground to serve as a wall. So I need to have a 4 tefach area that's raised in order for the beam that's above it to serve as a wall for it. And we have a rule in all of Hilchos Eruvin that a wall doesn't count as a wall unless it's serving an area at least 4 tvachim. That's why I got to have 4 tvachim. According to Rav Yosef, it's not serving as a wall, it's just serving as a sign, and as long as you could notice it, it's fine. So you just need a tefach space under it, where you could be standing and see the beam, and it's not too high. Okay, the third explanation about this machlokes is if the sign, the symbolic beam at the top, has to be the same width as the symbolic beam at the bottom. Okay, what we are doing here is filling in the ground to create a symbolic rise on the bottom. According to Rav Yosef, it should be about the same width. According to Abaye, it shouldn't be the same width. It should be larger because it's lower. It's on the ground. It's harder to see. It should be larger and deeper into the mavoi. And again, we use the minimum significant size of 4 tvachim. And now the fourth explanation is what this machlokes is about, is are we concerned that the threshold, the raised platform, the raised ground that we're creating, that it'll get worn out by people stepping and walking in the area. According to Rav Yosef, we're not concerned, so it's enough if it's just a tefach. According to Abai, we are concerned, therefore it has to be deeper than a tefach, and again we use the minimum significant size of 4 tefachim. Okay, now the Gemara goes to a parallel discussion. What happens if the beam is too low? If it is less than 10 tvachim off the ground. So you need to dig out the ground beneath it in order to have a 10 tefach space between the beam and the floor below it. So how far into the mavoi do you have to dig out that ground? So we have the same Manda Amrim, but different opinions. According to Rav Yosef, it has to go 4 tvachim. According to Abai, it has to go 4 amas. Now, where is this machlokes about? So the Gemara is assuming that the machlokes is about what is the minimum size of a mavoi, because the part which is outside this enlarged, dug out area doesn't count as the mavoi here. So this area has to be, you have to dig out at least the minimum size to be a mavoi. So how big does a mavoi have to be? So the Gemara assumes that according to Rav Yosef, a mavoi has to be 4 tvachim long, and that's all. 4 tvachim extending away deep from its open side. Remember, each mavoi has one open side, at least. So extending the back wall has to be at least 4 tvachim from the open side. According to Abai, it's got to be 4 ames. So now the Gemara wants to know, what is this machlokes about? So the Gemara says, maybe this machlokes is over a statement of Rav Ami and Rav Asi. What's the case there? The case is there where you have a mavoi that actually has Rosh Hashanah running along 2 sides. The mavoi is nestled in the corner of an elbow of Rosh Hashanah, so that Rosh Hashanah passes the open side of the mavoi, but it also passes one of the adjacent sides to the open side. And what happened is that actually the wall between the wall of the mavoi, which has a Rosh Hashanah running along its other side, that wall broke, and it broke near the open side. So, is it still kosher? Can you still carry within the mavoi, or do I have to do something to fix that broken space? Do I have to consider like another door to the mavoi, another open side of the mavoi, and I have to put a beam on top or a lechi on the side, or do I have to fix the wall? What do I have to do? So Rav Ami and Rav Asi said, look, as long as the piece of standing wall in the corner between the broken part of the wall and the open side, right, meaning the third side is open, then you have a piece of wall running perpendicular to the open side, and then it's broken. So as long as that piece of wall is at least 4 tfachim, it's okay. You just view the broken wall as a doorway, as long as it's less than 10 amas, like all doorways, like the halacha of what a doorway is allowed to be. But it's viewed as another doorway. A doorway doesn't need an extra klera on top, beam on top, or lechi to fix it, and it's okay. And even if people start using the doorway instead of the main entrance to the mavoi, that's alright, it's a doorway. But I have to have at least a piece of wall still standing that's 4 tfachim long. That means that when you walk in the main entrance, the open side of the mavoi, you have to have wall on either side of you, on your left and on your right, at least 4 tfachim deep. So that sounds like that they are saying that the minimum size of a mavoi has to be 4 tfachim. So maybe that's what Abai and Rav Yosef are arguing over. That Rav Yosef holds of that, but Abai says no, it's got to be longer. It has to be 4 ames. So Gemara says no, Abai can't accept that. That's talking about where you had a mavoi and then it broke. So once it had the halacha of mavoi, if it broke, you only need 4 tfachim deep to be able to maintain the status of mavoi. However, when you're creating a mavoi, like our case where the beam is too low, and you want to dig out ground to create a halachic mavoi, there you have to start off with 4 amas. You can't start off with 4 tfachim. You got to get 4 amas. Abaye now attempts to prove his position that the minimum size of a mavoi is at least 4 amas. It's not considered a mavoi unless you have a length of 4 amas from the entrance side, the open side, to the back wall. So Abaye's first proof is that there's a halacha that every mavoi, in order to count as a mavoi, has to have 2 courtyards minimum that open into it, and has to have 2 houses minimum that open into those yards. Now, how could you possibly have 2 courtyards opening into a mavoi if the side walls of the mavoi only measure 4 tvachim? Halachically, the minimum size of a doorway of an opening is 4 tvachim. So you would have to have the entire sides be open in order for it to count as a doorway, and you couldn't possibly have that because you need to have the side posts and the frames and all kinds of other things. So you couldn't possibly have 2 courtyards opening into this mavoi if the side walls are only 4 tvachim. Obviously, it's got to be more than that, and I'm correct that it's 4 amas. Now, maybe you'll tell me that the courtyards open into the back wall of the mavoi, and that's wider than 4 tvachim. That can't be, because we know that the halacha is that a mavoi has to be longer than it is wide. From the open side to the back wall has to be a longer space than between the side walls on the left and on the right. So if the side walls measure only 4 tvachim each, as Rav Yosef suggests they can, which means that from the open side all the way till the back wall measures only 4 tvachim, and you want to tell me that the back wall measures more than 4 tvachim along its length, and that's where your 2 courtyards open, that couldn't be, because then you have a mavoi which is wider than it is long, and that wouldn't count as a mavoi at all. That's proof number 1. On that, Rav Yosef is not concerned, because he says that you measure the doorways at an angle. That the 2 back corners of the mavoi are the doorways, and therefore, even if it's only 3 tvachim along the side and 1 tefach along the back, you have a angled doorway of more than 4 tvachim, and therefore you have a 4 tefach doorway, even though the entire mavoi itself might be only, let's say, 4 tvachim by 3 tvachim. Right? The side walls measuring from the front of the mavoi to the back could stretch 4 tvachim. 3 of those tvachim are open, and then you have a tefach of the back wall which is open. So your angled doorway is more than 4 tvachim in a situation like that. Okay, second proof. By the way, Abaye doesn't hold that, because Abaye says you can't put the doorway in the corner. That's not a normal place to put a doorway. Now, Abaye's second proof is from a statement of Rami Bar Chama in the name of Rav Huna, which the Gemara will analyze at length, which says the following thing. Let's say you built a mavoi, and the open side has a wall that sticks into it. It's almost like there's a bit of a fourth wall there. But that wall wasn't made there to be a lechi. That wall was built there to be a support for the house, which is on the corner of the mavoi. So you have a natural lechi that sticks into your open side of the mavoi, but that lechi wasn't made to be a lechi. Can you count that as a lechi, or do you have to put another lechi? So Rav Huna says you're allowed to count it if it's up to 4 amas. More than 4 amas you can't. So obviously you see that 4 amas counts as a wall of a mavoi, says Abaye. 4 amas or less is a mavoi wall. 4 amas or more, is a mavoi wall. That's why 4 amas and more you can't count as a lechi. But if it's less than 4 amas, then it is a lechi. So I'm correct that 4 amas and more is a mavoi wall. Less than that is not called a mavoi, it's called a lechi. Rav Yosef answers that. Simply he says no. A mavoi wall could be less, but you can't say that it can't be a lechi unless it's less. A lechi could be up to 4 amas. A mavoi wall could also be less than 4 amas. It could be both. This case, the situation is where you want to have to prove that this is not a lechi and require another lechi. In order for that to happen, you need at least more than 4 amas. Okay, the Gemara now analyzes this case more in a detail here, where you have a naturally built lechi sticking into the open side of the mavoi, and we had said you can only count it as a lechi if it is less than 4 amas. If it's 4 amas or more, you can't count it as a lechi. You need to put in another lechi. So the Gemara asks, where are you supposed to put that lechi? If you put it next to this if you put that lechi next to this existing wall, all you're doing is making that wall longer. You're not adding a lechi. So what's lechi about it? So Gemara offers 2 answers. Either Rav Papa, who says, no, you put it on the other side, opposite the piece of the wall there, no natural lechi, or Rav Yeshua, who says, no, you could put it next to the existing wall. Just make sure that it is either taller or shorter than the existing wall, so that it is set apart, and therefore it doesn't look like just an extension of that wall. It's clearly a lechi. Okay, next halacha is from Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua, who says that this halacha, that it's no good, that you need to put another lechi, if the sticking out wall is 4 amos or more, that's only true if that 4 amos is more than, if that 4 amos is less than half of the width of the open side of the mavoi, meaning the open side of the mavoi measures 8 amos or longer. So this 4 amos is less. If, however, it's more than half, so even though it can't count as a lechi, it does count as something else. It counts as the halacha of oimid meruba al haparts, which is we can consider this entire side closed because the majority of it has an actual wall, and the halacha is that when the majority of it has an actual wall, it counts as fully closed, even though it's missing a big piece. Now, how do I know that that's true? How do I know the halacha of oimid meruba al haparts, that if the majority of the side is filled in, it counts as if it's closed, even though part of it is not? Because that's halacha which it says in about a chutzner which has holes in its wall. As long as the majority of the side is filled in, that's still considered to be a solid wall. Now, if it says it by a chutzner has stricter halachas than a mavoi. In a chutzner, you can't use a beam or a lechi to consider a gap which is too big to consider it closed. In a mavoi, you can. In a chutzner, you can't. So chutzner has stricter rules, and yet we still say oimin meruba al haparts. We still say that if it has gaps, they're considered closed as long as it's a minority of the side. So in a mavoi, as long as it's a minority of the side, I could also consider the gaps closed, and therefore, if this piece of wall sticking out is a majority of the open side, I can consider it closed. Gemara says, well, hold on a second. Who says that you can necessarily learn mavoi out of chatzar? You had a kal v'chomer because you showed me that chatzar has stricter halachas than a mavoi. I'll show you that a mavoi has stricter halachas than a chatzar. The maximum gap in a chatzar is up to 10 amos. Up to 10 amos can be considered a doorway. The maximum gap in a mavoi wall is only 4 amos. So you see that a mavoi has stricter rules than a chatzar. So how do you know you could learn a kal v'chomer, a kula, from a chatzar to a mavoi? So Gemara says, well, Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua holds that actually a mavoi can even go up to 10 amos. You can even have a gap up to 10 amos, and that's actually the halacha. And therefore, you don't have a problem with my kal v'chomer. You have nowhere to show me that mavoi has actually stricter rules than a chatzar. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. But Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua was saying his halacha on the case, which was stated by Rav Huna, not the same Rav Huna, a different Rav Huna. And Rav Huna himself holds that you have only up to 4 amos in a mavoi wall. So a mavoi is stricter. So Gemara says, okay, well, Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua was saying it on Rav Huna's case, but he wasn't saying that Rav Huna agrees to it. You're right, in Rav Huna, you wouldn't necessarily be able to prove that this halacha is true. However, in Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua, who holds that a mavoi gap can go up to 10 amos, therefore you have no problem with this kal v'chomer, and it stands true. Okay, now the Gemara brings the third halacha on this case. Rav Ashi says, actually, if the wall that sticks out is exactly half, and it's 4 amos, meaning the wall is 4 amos, and the gap is, the entire side is 8 amos, so it's exactly half. So we had said that that's no good, because 4 amos is not a kosher wall, and it's not half. So says Rav Ashi, no, either way, you could assume that it's okay, because you don't know if it's exactly, it's hard to tell if it's exactly half, or slightly more than half, or slightly less than half. And I'm going to show you that in most cases, it's going to be okay. Why? Because if it's slightly more than half, you don't have a problem, like Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua said, because you have oimin meruba, most of the side is closed. If it's slightly less than half, that means that it's less than 4 amos. Less than 4 amos is a lechi. The only situation where you have a problem is if it's exactly half. It's 4 amos exact, and it's exactly half. Okay, that's a rare situation. On a whole, this whole halacha is derabanan. You do not have to be concerned with that possibility, and you could assume that it is.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.